Okay, so Sekka Slide should be at 3. Now, this is probably a bit less controversial than the video I made about Thunder and Colossus being back to 1. If you want to check that out, here's a link to that. In this video, I would like to share my thoughts on Sekka Slide, why I think this card is fantastic, why it's balanced, why I think it has no business being on the ban list whatsoever, except, you know, maybe marketing strategies from Konami's side. If you enjoy these types of videos, make sure to leave a comment in the comment section down below, letting me and the community here know what you think about this card, if you think it should stay at 1 or if it could go back to 2 or maybe even 3. And with that being said, let's get right into the topic. The main reason I think Sekka Slide has always been more or less a fan favorite card is because of the way it challenges players to approach deck building in a very different way. So prior to this card's existence, the idea of monster mash decks, so decks that only consist of monsters, were not really like, or was not really like, let's say, a meta viable concept. I mean, I remember myself in 2011 building this monster mash deck with Gallus and Hyperion cards and whatnot. And I mean, this was also due to my 12-year-old me being totally incompetent at deck building and the game in general, but also because there was just no real payoff or advantage that you gained out of playing only monsters. I mean, that was completely competitively irrelevant, right? So what I love so much about Sekka Slide is that the card is so good that sometimes, and not always, it justifies you building your entire deck around this card if your deck allows you to, without losing sort of its like core strategy or core game plan, I would say. And I mean, the card is busted. Like, drawing 3 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just insane. Like, but it comes with a trade-off. And I think that is the great thing about the card conceptually, is that it comes with a great trade-off. And I mean, especially if I look at like game 2 and game 3 in a match, siding becomes very weird and problematic with this card in your deck. If you build your whole deck around Sekka Slide, it is sort of the best card in your deck, right? It is the card that you always want to draw. So post-siding, if you want to combat Mystic Mine or like back row decks or these huge boards that you want to break with Dark Ruler, Lightning Storm, Droplet, and these cards, these spell cards that you have to side in, you have to take out the best card of your deck, which is Sekka Slide, to put in these strong side cards. So I love this problem that you face when you play this card. I think we haven't really seen this sort of dynamic before in the game. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that Sekka Slide promotes this very weird but also exciting way to think about deck building, and I would love to have that back in the game. Arguably, the biggest concern you could bring up is that combo decks just profit too much off this card. So Sekka Slide could potentially restrict Konami from new design choices. And you could say that as long as Sekka Slide is in the game, Konami has to be very careful whenever releasing a new archetype that doesn't rely on spell and traps too heavily, which historically speaking would always be combo decks, right? I mean, if we take a look back at the ban list that limited Sekka Slide, a lot of people were very surprised, including myself. There was a big question mark as to why they even did that in the first place. I mean, the only deck that was really abusing this card was Danger Thunder Dragon, and that deck was already quite hit. I remember Agapim was already banned, I guess. I didn't really have the same power anymore, and a lot of people were already playing like Allure of Darkness, for example, to trigger more of the Thunder Dragons and stuff. So it wasn't really like a, I would say Sekka Slide, and I think the player base agrees here that Sekka Slide wasn't really the card that made the deck broken, but it was more so the engine, the different engines that work together, the danger cards, the Guard Dragon engine and stuff. So it was a big surprise. Now, if I look back at the past half year, and I imagine Adamantipator with 3 Sekka Slides, I mean, that would have been really crazy. That deck was already incredibly strong and is still very strong, but with Block Dragon, I mean, it already scratched tier 0.5, I guess. I mean, everybody knows that if you open 2 of the Researchers, 2 of the Adamantipator monsters, you can play through just about 2 or 3 hand traps, I guess. And at that point, if you can get to these more consistently with a card like Sekka Slide, I guess it becomes very, very broken. Would have made the deck probably like tier 0.5. I'm not too sure, but I do like to believe that this was the reason they put it to 1 in the first place, and maybe also the reason they don't want to bring it back to 3 for now. It is a very generic good card that limits them in their creative design freedom, I guess. But I mean, you can say that for a lot of cards. I think that this is one of the beauties of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that cards from like 5 years ago can become very relevant in today's metagame just because a new archetype gets released or a new support gets announced or whatever. I don't really see Sekka Slide being that ban-worthy or that limit-worthy. Like, it was never really the problematic card of the deck, I would say, of any deck that played it at least. So that's my point of view, but I do understand that it limits the card design in some aspects, maybe. So there's that, I guess. One thing I would also like to say is that In comparison to other banned or limited cards, the player base doesn't seem to be as split on Sekka's Light. I mean, most players I've talked to want this card back at 3. And after all, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a community-driven game. In a perfect world, the ban list would just address what people see as a problem, and obviously that doesn't really work that way, and that's fine. Konami also has to use the ban list as part of their selling strategy too. I mean, that's sort of the trade-off that comes with having no set rotation. But I do want to believe that, at least to some degree, they try to work on the things the community is shouting for, even if very often a bit too late. But that's maybe for another discussion. All in all, I think Sekka's Light is an interesting, exciting card that promotes different and most of all very, very fun deck building. And I don't know, man, I'm just so curious to see what people would come up with this card again. Let me know if there's any, you know, decks that could really profit off this card that I might have forgotten. You know, maybe there's like a hidden deck that I don't know about that would get like tier 0 immediately after this card being back at 3. But that's it. I mean, I hope you guys loved it, and see you